Some stories are never finished. They're just filed away. Welcome to Chronicles of the Obscure. January 26th, 1966, Australia Day. Picture Glenelg Beach in Adelaide, a perfect postcard from the height of the Australian summer. The sun is blazing, casting a brilliant glare over the crowded shores. The air is thick with the scent of salt water and coconut-scented lotion. Children's laughter mixes with the cry of gulls and the gentle wash of waves against the sand. This is a snapshot of mid-century Australia at its most relaxed, a nation basking in an era of post-war prosperity and seemingly unbreakable social trust. It was a time when front doors were often left unlocked, and children roamed their neighborhoods with a freedom that today seems almost mythical. On this particular day, a simple, trusted ritual unfolded, one repeated in countless households across the country. 3 siblings, 9-year-old Jane, 7-year-old Arnna, and 4-year-old Grant Beaumont, boarded a bus for the short 5-minute trip from their home to the beach. They'd done it before. Their parents, Jim and Nancy, trusted their community, trusted the familiar rhythm of their lives. The children were expected back on the noon bus, home for lunch, but the noon bus came and went without them. Then the 2 o'clock bus. As the afternoon sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the now emptying beach, a knot of parental concern tightened into outright alarm. By evening, Jane, Arnna, and Grant Beaumont had vanished. Their disappearance was not just a missing persons case, it was a cultural fault line, a crack that appeared suddenly in the bedrock of Australian society. As criminologist Dr. Xanthi Mallet states, the event fundamentally changed society. This isn't just a story about what happened to 3 children. This is the story of what happened to the country they left behind, a nation that awoke the next day to find itself a different, more fearful place. How does a single, unsolved mystery rewire the psyche of an entire nation? Let's open the evidence locker and examine the facts that transformed this case from a local tragedy into a national obsession. The timeline is stark in its simplicity. The children left their modest home on Harding Street around 10 a.m. for a day of sun and surf. They were well-behaved, sensible children familiar with the short bus route. Several reliable witnesses saw them at the beach, playing near the jetty and under a sprinkler on the lawn. They were last seen purchasing snacks at a cake shop with a £1 note their mother had given them. This simple purchase, a mundane detail of a summer's day out, would become one of the last confirmed sightings. They were expected back on a noon bus. When they missed it, their mother assumed they'd opted for the later one, wanting to extend their fun. But when 2 p.m. arrived with no sign of them, Nancy Beaumont walked to the bus stop herself, a mother's intuition beginning to scream that something was profoundly wrong. The public response was immediate and immense, a tidal wave of community action. It wasn't just police. It was an army of volunteers, neighbors, and total strangers who swarmed Glenelg Beach and the surrounding suburbs. They searched the dunes, the amusement park, the changing sheds, every nook and cranny, driven by a collective disbelief that children could simply vanish from such a crowded public place. The search reflected a shared assumption that such a thing simply could not happen here, not in safe, sunny Adelaide. This communal effort wasn't just about finding the children, it was about restoring a sense of order, proving that the world they believed in was still intact. The case also lives on through a specific, haunting cultural artifact, the black and white photographs of the children. Jane, with her thoughtful gaze, Arnna, with her bright, wide smile, and little Grant, the baby of the family. These images, endlessly reproduced in newspapers and on television screens, became frozen in time. They were no longer just family photos. They were the focal point for a nation's burgeoning anxiety. The pictures transformed a private, unbearable tragedy into a public symbol, their innocent faces asking a question that Australia couldn't answer. The deep void left by the children's absence naturally spawned landscapes of explanation. Over the years, countless theories and suspects have been proposed, investigated, and dismissed. But the true suspect in our analysis is the changing social narrative itself. The most persistent story to emerge is that this was the day Australia, or at least Adelaide, lost its innocence. This theory paints the pre-1966 era as a kind of sun-drenched Eden, a safer, simpler time where children could play without supervision and neighbors all knew each other. While comforting, this narrative is more about collective memory and nostalgia than historical fact. The past is never as simple as we remember it, but the loss of innocence in the story provided a framework for a nation grappling with a new and terrifying reality. A more critical analysis suggests the case forced an uncomfortable social reckoning. It shattered the comforting myth of universal safety and exposed deep vulnerabilities in the social fabric. The idea that a predator could be present in a crowd, appearing ordinary, was a deeply unsettling revelation. Witnesses reported seeing the children with a tall, blond man of athletic build. Suddenly, this vague description became a phantom haunting the public imagination. The search for a tall, blond man was really a search for a monster that could exist in plain sight, disrupting the very foundation of social trust. Every stranger became a potential threat. Every familiar public space held a new, invisible danger. From this reckoning came the most concrete impact, the theory of institutional change. This one isn't a theory, it's proven fact. The Beaumont case is directly credited with fundamentally altering Australian lifestyles. Before 1966, it was common for children to have a wide, unsupervised roaming radius. After, the tether between parent and child shortened dramatically. Parents could no longer presume public spaces were safe. An invisible fence of fear was erected around every playground, every street corner, every beach. The simple act of letting a child walk to the local shops became a fraught decision. It was a practical, painful, and permanent shift in the rhythm of daily life. The Beaumont case never closed. It simply evolved, echoing through the decades. It remains an open and active police investigation, a cold case that refuses to grow cold in the public consciousness. As recently as 2018, police excavated a factory site in North Plimpton based on new information, a major operation that drew national media attention. Each new search, each fresh lead, is less about an expected breakthrough and more about a society's enduring need to resolve a foundational trauma to fill in the blank space that has existed for over half a century. We dig for answers because the not knowing is unbearable. The case's legacy is tangible and systemic. It helped create the framework for modern missing persons protocols and alerts, forever changing how law enforcement and the media respond to such incidents. It professionalized the search for the lost. The poet Bruce Daw, in his work The Lost, wrote of such figures, their faces having the power to harrow us forever. The Beaumont children remain lodged in the national consciousness, not as characters in a true crime drama, but as a permanent question mark on the timeline of Australian social history. They are a constant, quiet reminder of a vulnerability we can never again afford to forget. The disappearance of the Beaumont children is a chronicle of a different kind. It isn't about the ghoulish details of a crime. It's about how an unresolved mystery can transcend its own facts to become a catalyst for permanent society-wide change. It moved the needle on societal trust, parenting norms, and collective anxiety in a way few other events have. It taught a nation that the world was more complex and dangerous than it had wanted to believe. The enduring power of this case lies not in a potential future solution, but in the profound and irreversible impact it has already had. It forces us to consider what we lose, not just in a single tragedy, but in the relentless, necessary shift towards caution that follows. What unresolved event in your own community's history left a lasting mark on how people live? Share your story in the comments below, and subscribe to Chronicles of the Obscure for more stories about the events that quietly reshaped our world.